Hey guys, welcome to Living in the Aftermath. This is Lyndsey, your weekly trauma host. And this week we are joined by Laura. And I found her on social media and reached out to her because I immediately resonated with all of her content because her and I, unfortunately, have been through very similar traumas. So I will let her kind of introduce herself and then we will jump into her story. And I really hope you guys like it. So welcome, Laura.
Of course they're gonna like it. We're
I know.
likable.
We really are. That our conversation that we just had on your podcast was absolutely amazing. So we're gonna just like link each other back and forth because I feel like
Perfect.
any conversation that we have is just gonna be a good one in general.
Okay, good. I'm glad. Well, I'm Laura Richards. I'm the host of the That's Where I'm At podcast, and I'm a podcaster, speaker, author, and coach. And I spent 32 years with a narcissist, and I decided to start talking about it after I got divorced for irreconcilable differences. And then figured out my brain started to heal, and I said, "What the heck just happened to me?" And so I unraveled 32 years. I started to unravel all his lies. And so now I speak to women to help them heal and also to understand the narcissist mind games and heal. I do a circus theme. So to heal from the clowns so that we don't go back to the circus anymore.
Which is why I feel like I resonated with you so deeply because, like you and I talked about, so many times when domestic violence or things like these are talked about, it's just like a word or something
Yeah.
that doesn't give any sort of context. And so I loved all of your content and how you describe things and how you talk about it because I think how we talk about it is
Yeah.
so important.
I try to make it so that it's relatable.
Mhm.
And then things that look, if my brain comes up with this thing and I think about, holy crap, what was, like this thing that comes, I'm like, other people are probably thinking about that when that happened to them too, because I have people in my comments all the time that say like, yeah, that's right. Like that's what it means. And so, and also my ex ended up, he was with somebody probably before we got divorced. And then he immediately lived with her and now he's married to her. And so it was a whole grooming thing. And I felt thrown away like trash right after
Yes.
33 years with him. Right. Right.
Yeah.
And so I needed to heal from that. And I thought, how am I going to do this? What I needed to understand was it wasn't about me. And so when I started to pull myself away from what are his patterns, what do abusers do, and then what did I need and why did I allow that? Because we don't blame for abuse, but we learn to understand our patterns so that we don't get back into the same patterns. And
Absolutely.
so, yeah, and because I don't want to hear from anybody like, I should have picked better or whatever, because he did not come in beating me. He came in with everything I ever wanted. I want to get married and have kids, and I will promise you the world. Yes, in the process, I will emotionally abuse you.
Well, and I've had so many people, I think it was on my roller coaster podcast where he's like, yeah, they don't come in hitting you. And I was like, well, if they
No.
did, how many people would stay and deal with that? Probably not very many. And I don't even remember where I heard it, and I should probably find it because I absolutely loved it. But they explained the beginnings of a narcissistic relationship and how it is all of these promises and it flows so well and you feel so connected to this human and then all of a sudden it changes. But you haven't changed anything different that you can tell, and they're
Right.
telling you they haven't changed anything different. And
Right.
so then in your head, if they haven't changed anything different, it has to be something that you're doing different. And so it immediately starts those mind games of questioning what is
Immediately.
real in this. And that is so hard to recognize when you're in it.
It really is. And that's why, especially if they're telling you that they haven't changed anything. And see, if we are decent human beings, we think the person we're with, we believe that they're also a decent human being. That's why it was so hard to wrap my head around what had happened to me because I would never have done that if I never would have done any of the things he did. That's just not who I am. So when things change, right, you're trying to get back. So now we're already in the trauma bond. So we're trying to get back to that good guy that we saw at the beginning, that nice guy that we
Hmm.
saw at the beginning. We're trying to get back to that. And so when they say like, well, I haven't done anything different, you are the problem. You're changing. You're less tolerant of me or
Hmm.
whatever the things are. I heard all my life, all my married life too, that I was difficult and all these things, right? If I would be better insert in this way, our life would be better. Our marriage would be better. So my God, I spent so many years just trying to be better, whatever the hell that meant.
Yep.
And narcissists are, I mean, narcissists are always moving the goalposts. So you can never be better. You're never going to reach it. They're always going to change. And it's that, like you just said, they just change it. And then you're like, well, wait, I thought I was doing the right thing. And now we're already stuck in the trauma bond because our abuser is also the person who's soothing us. And so
Hmm.
now we're already chemically bonded to them. It happens so unbelievably fast. And that's why when we start seeing a red flag, well, there were 100 green flags. And then
Yeah.
there were 100 green flags after that. And the red one was in the middle. And the first red flag looked like, that was weird. Why did he say that to me? And so when people say, like, why didn't you leave at the first red flag? The first red flag wasn't a hit. The first red flag was him talking rude to you or saying that girl looks better in that dress than you do or than you would because whatever, X, Y, and Z. And then if you confront them, they're like, "Oh, you're just overreacting. You
You're
make
so
a big deal.
sensitive.
You're so sensitive. I'm just joking. What's the
Yeah.
problem?" But that's really the red flag. It's starting the devaluing, and it's
Yes.
amazing to me how fast it
Well,
happens.
and one thing that I find super interesting, and I wonder if you, I mean, I'm sure you relate to it, which is shocking that I'm going to say that out loud before I say
Right.
it, but I am that confident in the statement. I think that a lot of abusers that are that way are such good salesmen that they pick up on those little things that they know matter to you
Yeah.
and the wording that they know will affect you the most. And so it's not just a you're being so sensitive. It is customized to you
Yes.
specifically to be
Exactly.
so subtle. So even us giving these examples, I think I want people to understand, like, I think that's why it makes it so hard to pick up on because
Mhm.
they are so talented in learning you and the things that matter to you. It's yes, it's about them, but they all know what they
Yes.
have to do to get us bought in enough and
Right.
then make us question our own reality. And that is
Yeah.
terrifying.
And I remember him saying things like, "Oh, remember, you have this issue with your parents or childhood thing or whatever." So if I was being s and then I'd sit there and go like, "No, like that doesn't no, that's not a thing. I don't know what you're talking about. Like that's not a thing." But he'd say, "Oh no, remember you said so it must be why you're upset." And so they're trying to customize it. And so then half the time I was just like, "Okay, yes. Sure, I'll work on that." Like
Yeah.
whatever the issue was in my childhood. Sure, I'll work on that. I don't
Okay.
know.
I'm struggling.
Okay. I mean, I conceded so many times, but that's just part of the self-abandonment. I conceded so many times to just go, "Yeah, okay. Yeah, fine." Because I just had to give up because my God, they will fight you forever and ever and ever,
Forever. Yes.
ever.
So when did you meet him? How old were you when you met him?
I was 19, he was 18. We met in college. And
Okay.
then I was actually dating my high school boyfriend. So I dated him for 5 years. And then my ex, we actually met in a class in college. And then he started dating somebody. And so we all used to hang out together as friends.
Mhm.
We would hang out together. And then after a few years, we just each, didn't stay with our partners, not because we wanted to be with each other or anything like that. It is definitely not anything like that. And then he was like, maybe we should date. And I was like, "Oh, maybe we should. Somebody has an interest in me. Well, let me date them because Laura needed love and was
Yes.
like, would look in the gutter. It doesn't matter. Like, Taylor Swift talks about eating out of the trash. Yes,
Yeah, that is literally what you did.
I did. And the thing is that he groomed me as his friend because I just thought he was the greatest guy. Just thought he was so great. He was so funny. He was everything I would want. And I thought to myself, man, after college, I'm really gonna miss him. Okay, well, that was the grooming part of it. I was really already interested in him before we were even broken up with our partners. And that happened with his current partner. And I always bring that up because there's a pattern. Because some people are like, who cares about her? Well, you should care because there's a pattern. It's like,
Yes.
it's not what we don't talk about her because we just want to talk about her. It's because there's a pattern. We were all friends. And now she's wife number two because there's a pattern. There was the grooming, and it's like, how did they get together right away? Well, because he groomed her to be
Mhm.
ready as the new
Yeah.
supply. Yeah.
Which my abuser did the same exact thing. We
Oh
didn't
my
talk
gosh.
about that on mine, but my
Yeah.
abuser, his girlfriend that he had at the tail end, because he wanted me to be a sister wife, and I said no to that.
Oh my
And
gosh.
then he
Wait, we
I
have to
know.
talk about this. Listen, because so many people say like three ways they
Yes.
compromise. Okay, listen, they compromise their values to be in a three-way because
Mhm.
that's what their partner wanted.
And you wanna
Um,
make them happy because if
we want to
you
make
want
them
to
happy.
show that you truly love them, because if
Yes,
you
and so the
truly love
sister
them, you
wife
want
thing.
them to be fulfilled and
Oh my
happy.
gosh, you
Yes.
are not the first person to talk about the sister wife thing and all this
Yes.
stuff, and don't you want me to be happy and all this
Yep.
stuff, and let me tell you, it's disturbing, and this is
Yes.
how easily though I mean, there was a celebrity that I think it was Demi Moore was talking about that she did things to compromise herself. And it's like, it can happen to anybody. I just did an interview earlier. We were talking about celebrities. I love that celebrities will talk about it because it can happen to anybody. So anyway,
Yes.
sorry I interrupted you about the
No, not at
situation.
all. Well, no, but one thing that I love about us even having this conversation is I didn't even realize that I was being sexually assaulted in my marriage because I
Right,
agreed to the things that we ended up doing because
right.
I was like, if it was so it started out
Mhm.
as a sister wife, I said no to that, and a couple years later, I don't remember the timeline exactly, but we had 3 children by the time the presentation came that "You alone will never make me happy. It has nothing to do with you. It's a me
Disgusting.
thing, and
My
if
god,
you really love me and you want me to be fulfilled in life, I need to date other women." And we had
disgusting.
3 kids, and divorce was very foreign in my world, and so
Yeah.
I felt very hopeless, and so like I mentioned to you, the phrase "marriage is hard." When I would go to people and I wouldn't be like, "Hey, my husband is dating other women," because that's not who am I gonna say that to, you know?
Exactly,
And
because you did, if I remember correctly, you because I've listened to your story, you
Mhm.
did let him date other women, right?
Yes, I said
Yes, and
yes.
see, and this is
Mhm.
never to shame you. I just every time something like this happens, we have to say it. This is how they
Yes.
get this is
Yes.
listen, Lindsay agreed in her marriage to let her husband date other people because he convinced her that
Mhm.
she could not make him happy enough. When I heard that in your story, I was not surprised. Okay, I'll tell
Yeah.
you that right now. That you said yes, I was like, of course you did, because
Yeah.
we were brainwashed into
Yes.
believing, "You're right. Yep, that's what I gotta
Yep.
do." And you were so young when you got with it. I know this is not my interview, but you there you were so young. Sorry, can't help
No,
it. You were
but
so
that's why I
young
love
when you
this.
but you're so young when you got together, and so that's why it's so easy. I mean, listen, I was 18. We got married. He was 22, I was 23. My
Yeah.
God. We were babies. What were we
Yes.
doing getting married?
Yep, yep. We were 19 and 21. Same.
Oh
Like
my gosh.
we knew nothing, okay?
Nothing.
And we lived in a very religious area, so we just wanted to have sex. Like, let's get real. That's what
Right,
happened.
exactly. Yeah.
But he ended up so he was arrested January 2nd, 2021 for the final
Okay.
time, and he moved in with his girlfriend, I know less than 20 days after his arrest.
Wow.
But I don't know for sure, but we were together for, like I said, almost 18 years total from, like, dating to married to all the things, and it took him less than a month to move in with his new girlfriend, who is now his wife. So when you
Yeah.
talk about that, I'm like, "Yeah, same." Like, they're
They
not unique.
no, they're not, and that's the thing, but the thing is that, we're gonna be talking with women, right, that have been decimated by these guys
Yes.
because I work with women in midlife because that's who I am, and I have to tell you, like, I'm meeting women who are 30 years in, 40 years in, and it's like, they just go off and do whatever, and so now we're left to pick up the pieces of this. And that's why we have to talk about, like, you are not trash just because they treated you like trash. They are trash. And we were being a good wife. We were doing all the things that we needed to do. We were probably doing more things that we like we did allowing them to do things we didn't need to allow them to do, but we were doing that to be a good wife and
Yes.
thinking we were anyway, and we were brainwashed, and that's okay. And that's why we learned. But listen, your broken heart can heal. It just takes some time. Takes
So,
time.
I know you mentioned earlier that you suffered from a lot of financial abuse, and I think that that is something that's so subtle that a lot of people don't understand. So, is there any examples that you can give that or you feel comfortable sharing that can kind of give a real life context to what that is for people? Because that's something I also struggled with, and I know I did not see it at the time. And so I'm
Yeah.
curious of your experiences with that.
I had it in my divorce as well, I think he hid some money, and then
Mm.
I didn't realize that because 'cause we're a no fault state, so everything and we didn't have minor children, we just divided everything, but I also think they should have looked a little harder for money that he had, and so I think about that, and then I was a stay-at-home mom for a long time, and just thinking about he would question me on money, and he'd say, "We need to sit down and do the budget," and I'd be like, "Okay." Well, I hated it because he treated me like a child. I don't know how you were treated. I was treated like the 4th child,
Yes.
so that is even if, like, I had access to money, Now, was I questioned? Yes. And did I like do certain things, like maybe get money out at the grocery store and stuff like that so that I had cash to go buy a Starbucks or something because I'd get in trouble if I bought a Starbucks, stuff like that.
Mhm.
Right. And I want to go to coffee with my friends and things like that. Like the kids are in school. My youngest has special needs. So he was in school and I then went back to school. And so I had opportunities like to go to lunch with my friends and stuff like that. And he just would look at every penny. And this is the other thing. This is what narcissists do. He would drop hundreds of dollars on lunch and golf and whatever with the boys. And when he was trying to impress his girlfriend. And let me tell you, he would get pissed at me if I spent $20 at
Yes.
Panera with my friend, that
Yes.
I bought her a sandwich because she was having a rough time. And so while okay, it doesn't have to be that they don't let you have access to the money, but it's like that where I'm having to hide and
Mhm.
be strategic on certain things. And the whole thing with the budget, towards the end, the last couple of years of our marriage, he would be like, I was just trying to be the yes man, all the time, just say, yes, yes, let's do that. Yeah, anything to save my marriage, anything. But I was already being discarded, so there was nothing in the
Yeah.
save it. And he would say, we have to sit down and look at the budget, or maybe you can just do it. I'm like, sure. What do you need me to do? Yes, let's sit down. I'm happy to budget. And then he'd be like, okay, well, we can't do it tonight. We'll do it another night. I'm like, anytime. You don't even have to wait for me to ask anytime. I'm willing to do it anytime because, of course he would get mad at me and say, you're never available. And
Yep.
then just it's never a good time.
It's
And
your fault. It's gotta
because
be your
it's, yeah,
fault.
exactly. And you were watching TV. There is a remote that has a power button on it that I could turn it off. All you have to do is say, can
Let's do
you,
this.
let's do this. Let's do the budget, which I wouldn't want to be interrupted, but whatever.
Yeah.
So I would say yes, but it never happened. And so then I was just blamed all the time for everything. So to the point where we were sitting in our divorce mediation because we just had to mediate. I didn't have to do a court thing, nothing like that. Because if it's no fault and we weren't fighting anything, we divided everything equally, it was fine, right? Well, sure. I mean, in hindsight, I could have done something different, but it doesn't matter. Everything was fine, quote unquote fine. And so we're sitting in mediation, and I had been a speech therapist, worked a full-time job as a speech therapist in the school district. And then in 2020, I decided to quote unquote retire because 2020 was 2020ing. And I just was like, I don't want to. And also my mom had passed away and I was having a lot of issues with that, which when you're with somebody who's abusive, why are you grieving? Like, what's wrong with
Yeah.
you? Why are you crying? Your mom is dead. Well, whatever. What's your problem? Get over it already. So I decided to quote unquote retire. And we were sitting in mediation. So I was doing an at-home boutique. I was selling stuff online, all those little things, right? And making some money. But I had had a full-time job with like a salary for 15
Yeah.
years, right?
Yeah.
And we're sitting in mediation and he says to her, Laura never contributed to the finances. And I was like, do you
Are
know
we
what
in
I
the
did?
same reality?
Do you know what because I didn't know I was an abused woman, but I think back to poor little 2022 Laura.
Ye
I was an abused Laura. I was an abused woman because I sat there going, yeah, maybe he's right. Maybe I haven't contributed. And let me tell you, and I always tell this to our mediator, who's now my friend. And this is a visual for anybody who's watching the video. She wears glasses. She did not put them on the end of her nose like I'd say tell this story because she goes like she stopped writing and she goes, Nevada doesn't care. And she put them back up and started writing. And I told her this story. I told her this story. She goes, what did I do? I go, you said Nevada doesn't care and you kept writing. And she goes, what did he do? He just sat back like a little boy who just got scolded. And I said, that was the
That is
first
amazing.
time I ever felt like somebody was on my side.
Yes.
And look, because let me tell you, he had me so brainwashed, I was like, "Yeah, maybe I haven't contributed. Maybe he's right."
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah, because 33 years of gaslighting me into thinking I haven't done shit.
Yes, which is so crazy, and I think it brings us into another thing that we talked about a little bit earlier, but I think it's kind of a controversial topic for us to discuss emotional abuse versus physical abuse.
Yeah.
And I think you and I both agreed that emotional abuse has stuck with me far longer than any
Yes.
punch I got or any bruise that I got. So,
Uh-huh.
do you have any situations where you can kind of give some context and
Sure.
examples of what you went through in your situation
Yeah.
and kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and I'll talk about my experience as well, but I wanna I wanna tell people every abuse, even physical, is psychological abuse. So
Yes.
all of us are being psychologically abused because you don't get hit and stay for fun. You get hit and you stay because you've been psychologically manipulated to be there.
Well, and to hope that you're going to be the thing that they choose to be better for. I think that
Exactly.
was something that I held on to. I was like, if I can just be a better wife or be
Yeah.
the best mom to his kids, he will want to choose to be better
Uh,
for us and our family. And I lived in that reality. That was the
yeah.
reality I lived in.
Hope and breadcrumbs. I lived off of hope and breadcrumbs, and I starved to death. I starved to death because hope and breadcrumbs don't get you anywhere. You can go out and
Mhm.
buy your own loaf of bread. Go get it.
Yes.
But I'm
Yes.
telling you, with the emotional abuse, it's the constant belittling, the backhanded compliments, intentional things. I was intentionally told I was not a good mom. And I would but why can't you tell me I'm a good mom? I did this. And, of course, like you just said, doing everything in the world to be a quote unquote good mom, whatever that means. Right. And then he would say, like, well, I can't tell you you're a good mom because of this, this, and this. So I'm not 100% a good mom, but I'm maybe 99% a good mom, but you still won't tell me? And he'd be like, no, because that makes you a bad mom. He would,
You have
and
room for improvement. That's what
my
mine would
God,
tell me. I love you
yes.
enough that I just am telling you the things you can improve on.
God,
That's
they
all I'm
suck.
doing.
Oh, God, they all suck.
Right?
Yes.
And that's the thing, I can sit here and I'm like, "I've heard all none of this is
It.
new." Yes.
All of it. And so I would go through the day. So I was a very yelly, screamy mom. I've had tons of healing with my kids, and so I wanna encourage you since you have young I know you have an adult, but you have young kids as well, and so
Yes.
I wanna encourage you that there is all that time for loving on each other and healing those parts, because if they bring it up, we have to be humble enough to say, "I know, my god, I'm so sorry that happened," and not to because I could have easily said, like, "I know, I was in abuse. Why don't you leave me alone?" But instead, I
Yes.
listened to my adult children say to me that this was painful and I hated the way you treated us. And I humbled myself. I gave intentional, specific apologies.
Apologies.
I didn't just
Same.
go like, okay, fine. I'm sorry.
Yes.
So that kind of thing. And I want everybody to hear there's always time because my kids were grown. I don't know what age, 24, 23, something when we got divorced. It was, look, we had tons of apologies and they apologized to me for the
Yeah.
things that they participated in because I was a yelly, screaming holes in walls kind of mom. Now, was I in reactive rage? Was I in survival mode? Was I being intentionally told I was a terrible mom and all these? Was I tired? I had a 5-year old, a 3-year old, a newborn, and the newborn had special needs. Was I tired? I was tired. I did not sleep. Nobody helped me. I was being told I was a bad mom. So what did it matter? And so when I think about that, I'm so sad that I don't have those soft years with my kids. So now my
Yeah.
daughter gets the good part of me now. And my kids are like, "Oh, God, must be nice." And I'm like, "I know."
I think that what you brought up is something that I have realized so significantly in my healing that I never realized prior to that. And I think it's something that exists in our society today in such an extreme way. People
Yeah.
cannot hold themselves accountable. For
It
whatever reason, that's such a negative thing. And I think that that is a really hard thing to teach someone if it's something that has
Yeah.
been scary, especially. And that's
Yeah.
something that my husband now has been so patient and so good to work with my kids because we
That's
don't
great.
yell in our house. You
Yeah.
can't yell. If you yell, all of us panic. I end up in the closet crying and it's just not productive, you know? And so finding someone that was patient enough to understand those triggers and also be willing to teach those lessons that I knew were going to be so crucial. Because
Yeah.
I think when you grow up with an example of someone who cannot hold themselves accountable and
Yeah.
nothing is their fault and it's always someone else's fault, those are really easy to traits to pick up on and then miss as
Yeah.
a parent when you're healing yourself and dealing with all the other craziness.
Mhm.
I've realized so significantly that that is even people who don't go through trauma really
Yeah.
struggle with holding themselves accountable, and I have found
Yeah.
that so interesting.
Yeah, because you don't have that example, but then also we have the entire world at our fingertips. And
Mhm.
so that was something that as I was getting older, I don't remember what age I was, but I just remember looking around at people and they were happy. And I'd be like, so like, are you just allowed to wake up and be happy? Because like that wasn't an example that I had. And I didn't ever see that model to me of I had some turmoil in the house. And so I didn't really have that model to me. And I literally say, I was just sick of myself at some point. And I'm like, I just want to be happy. I don't know what that means. Could somebody help me be happy? So I started going to therapy for that to like be happy and just figure out. So what that really was I wanted to learn how to set boundaries because people were walking all over Laura because I'm the
Yes.
eldest daughter, I'm the parentified daughter, all those things. And so I didn't have a boundary to save my life. And
Well, and one
that's
thing
what
I wonder if you relate to, I don't even wanna cut you off, but I'm like, I
Mhm.
need to know if you think this too.
Yeah,
I really, to my core, believed that setting a boundary was disrespectful to the person I was setting the boundary
correct.
for. And
Yes.
one thing that I also didn't even understand is a boundary is for myself, not for someone else.
Right,
And if
exactly.
someone is trying to
Exactly.
set a boundary for you, that is a problem. I never
Yes,
understood that or realized, like,
exactly.
boundaries are mine. I get to set a boundary for myself. No one else gets to say, "This is your boundary, don't cross it." That's control. And that
Right,
was a really
exactly.
confusing thing for me
Yes.
to figure out.
Was confusing. And so as a recovering people pleaser, at the time, right? I did not understand as a people pleaser, how will I tell people what to do? I can't set boundaries. And then I started to understand, no, you're a boundaries for yourself. And then they can do whatever they want with that information. So I was like, this is magical. But what you what you're going to find is people who have benefited from you not having any boundaries are going to be pissed that you have
Mhm.
boundaries. And so that's what I started to see when I really started to set boundaries. Around 2016 is when we had a major life event happen. We brought our son home from college for drugs and alcohol and getting in trouble with the law. And he knows I tell the story because it was the catalyst. So the last 10 years, it was the catalyst that of what started everything. And he always feels bad. I just saw him for lunch the other day and he was like, I feel so bad about that. I'm like, do you not hear the story? This is a happy ending,
Yeah.
because he's doing well. And it changed my life because I was being told that if I was a better mother, then he wouldn't have gotten in trouble with the law and all this stuff, right? Because it's our fault. Even though it was in a different city, miles away, it was somehow
It's
my
your
fault.
fault.
Of course it was. I have so much control,
Yes.
and so, and the other thing was I didn't have freedom and I never really had freedom. And I'm sure you relate to this if you grew up in a high control home, that I didn't have freedom to actually say how I was feeling about things. And so I was like, I hate the way he makes me feel. I really hate him right now. We gave him the world and this is what he's doing. Like I had those emotions, which are understandable and you're allowed to have. And so I didn't ever have that freedom anywhere. And my husband was like, "Oh my God, you can't say things like that." And I'm like, "Yes, I can." And which I'm surprised at myself that I behaved that way around him, but whatever. At that point, I guess I didn't give a crap. And I went to therapy, and that's where I started to find my voice and then really start to heal those parts of me. And I started to understand what boundaries were because this is what it looked like to me was I would actually get angry. So like if you and I were having a conversation and you were crossing whatever boundary, I would just sit there and go, somewhere along the way I gave you guys permission to treat me like crap and I don't like it. And so what that actually was me needing boundaries. And I didn't know. I didn't know what it was. And so, of course, the people who were benefiting from me not having boundaries were like, "Oh my gosh, what's wrong with you? Why are you talking to us like that? You're so difficult." And so, and those people aren't in my life anymore because Laura without boundaries is a lot better, but she doesn't exist anymore. She's dead. She's
Well,
gone.
and one thing that I think was such a foreign concept for me prior to healing from my
Yeah.
abuse was I believed that choosing myself was selfish and
Yes.
that that wasn't really loving someone and that loving someone was me sacrificing myself and how
Yes.
I felt. But I have learned that someone who really truly loves me wants me to choose myself because no one on this planet reads minds that I know of. And so, how would anyone know what I want other
Yeah.
than me? And so,
Right.
someone who loves me for who I am and not what I provide to them wants
Yes.
me to choose me because if I'm happy and I'm fulfilled, then I'm a better version for them too.
Well,
But
that's
I
the
did not
thing.
believe that was real.
No, absolutely not. Especially if we grew up in households where we were told that when we asked for our wants and needs, we were told we were difficult. And so
Yes.
I definitely was taught that. And so as I was going through this world, I'm like, oh, I'm easygoing. Every once in a while, I have to watch myself because, the healed version of Laura is like trying to heal everybody else. And it's like, okay, but she's kind of annoying. So, when people go like, oh, I'm so easygoing, and I'll be like, are you really easygoing, or have you never been allowed to have wants and needs? And they'll just like sit back and go, I'm like,
Crack.
sorry about that. But sometimes it's just like, it's worth that
Yes.
because if we haven't been taught it, why aren't we allowed to choose ourselves? When people say like, "Oh no, it's okay. It doesn't matter. No, it's okay." And I always say like, "You're allowed to say what you want and don't want." And
Yes.
I've had conversations with friends anyway, she asked me to do something. I told her, no, I don't want to. Or she said she didn't want to, or whatever it was. And then she texted me later that night and said, are you mad at me? All these things. I said, what? I said, no, listen, I am healthy enough that you're not going to lose my friendship over this. And I'm
Yeah.
healthy enough that if I had to say, hey, that really hurt my feelings, or whatever it was, then I would tell you. And she's like, oh my God, this is the healthiest conversation I've ever had. It's like, we're allowed. These are the kind of friendships, these are the kind of relationships we want to have where you're real and you can say that, no, I don't want to do that. That doesn't sound any fun. Let's compromise to something
Mhm.
else. And you don't actually lose a friendship over it.
That is the only relationship I will have in my life
But there's
going
no more
forward.
time
It's
for
just a
anything else.
waste of time otherwise, yes. And then so another thing that I really wondered if we would relate on, and I don't know if we will on this
Yeah.
one. This one I'm not as confident on, but
Okay.
I think the topic of being discarded is something that is brought up a lot, but it's not really talked about in context and what that feels like and what that
Yeah.
looks like in the moment and in a relationship. So, one thing that was really confusing for me was the day he was arrested, even though I had almost died and I had gotten the crap beat out of me for almost a year,
Yeah.
I loved that man. I
Of
believe I
course.
loved him.
Of
And I
course.
think that's a really confusing emotion or even
So
topic for
confused.
me to bring up to people. And
Yeah.
so, because you have experience and you do talk
Yes.
about it, can you talk a little bit about how confusing that was for you in it and how
Yeah.
maybe you see it differently now that you've been out of it?
Yeah, it's so hard because we're trauma bonded. So our abuser is also the one who's soothing us, right? And in my book, I have this picture of a guy who's shot with arrows and he's hugging the person who shot him with the arrows. So the abuser is the one who soothes you. I met up with my ex about a month after I found out about the girlfriend, and I wanted to confront him, and yelled and screamed at him, and then I asked him for a hug. I'm like, I'm still trauma bonded, and I think back to it, like, oh God, it makes me so
Yes.
ick. But I mean, that I was still trauma bonded, and it's hard. So that's why when you get out, you're not just going to be like, well, everything's great. Cause I truly thought I was walking out and I was going to get rid of the problem.
Hmm.
And I had friends who had been through this who were like, "Oh, you're gonna grieve, right?" I was like, "I'm not gonna grieve that motherfucker." So and
Yes.
they're like, "Yes, you will grieve." And my brain, literally my brain was like, "Don't we have a husband?" And I'd be like, "No, brain." I'd have to talk to myself. "No, brain, we don't have a husband anymore."
Yeah.
And so this is why, like, talking to yourself in the mirror, affirmations, manifesting, all that stuff, right? We have to retrain our neural pathways because our brain has been hearing one thing: you're crappy, you're a terrible mother, all the things. And then we can actually create new paths. So think about if you park in the driveway and you walk up to your front door. We didn't have a garage growing up. Okay, there was a path worn out in that grass, right?
Hmm.
But if you stop walking on there, the grass will grow back. And that's what can happen to our brain. And so it's so hard, but it's just so you know, it's normal
Yes.
to the point where every once in a while I'll be like, oh, I should check his social media just to see it. I'm like, no,
Just
I
to
can't.
know.
Just to know. I mean, I already know. Listen, my kids, see them, and so they know not to tell me anything about them. Every once in a while, they'll be like, "Can I tell you a dad story?" Because something terrible happened to him, and so I like to hear those stories because karma is working. Karma's at
See,
work.
and sometimes I have to admit, like, I do struggle with that. Like, there are
Yeah,
times where I get so frustrated, and
yeah,
like I told you, I wish that there was drugs or alcohol or something that I
right,
could pin it on. And so
yeah,
I have to admit that there are times where I get very hyper focused on, well, is it happening the same in the relationship he's in now? Is he doing
yeah,
the same things?
yeah.
And I hyper focus on that, even though I know it's not good for me and I don't ever
I
feed into
know,
it.
I
But it
know.
is so hard. And I
Well, it's
think I,
normal though. It's normal.
yes.
Listen, it's normal. It hasn't been that long for you. I understand. I mean, it's just been 3.5 years for me. So it's very normal. I have
Mhm.
friends who are like, God, it took me like 5 or 6 years before I stopped thinking about it. I'm like, what? Like, I don't want to hear that. But listen, you were in 2 decades. I was in 3. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like, it's a
Yes.
long time, and we were in it during formative years, okay?
Mhm.
During formative brain development years. So, yes, we have to redo those neural pathways. So give yourself time and grace. It can be done. It's just it's sort of like when you have grief, you live with grief, like when you lose somebody, like when I lost my mom, I thought, well, I'm never going to breathe again. I'm never going to live again. But you do live with it. The grief comes along with you. And then you grow around it and it doesn't get smaller, just you kind of grow around it. And so it's the same way. I try to think about it like that. It's been so long since I haven't cried about him.
Yeah.
And that to me started the beginnings of my healing was like, I didn't cry about him today. I didn't cry about him this hour, like this hour, that kind of thing. And that's where you have to start healing. And if you remember him saying you were a terrible mother, I would say like, no, I'm a good mom. And I would journal that. I'm a good mom because of this, this, and this. And then my kids would tell me things or my friends would tell me things. And I would live off of that so that you can start healing your brain. That's why
So
every
hard.
single coach and survivor talks about the trauma bond because
Mhm.
that was the worst thing. It was like you're addicted to drugs because you're
Yes.
chemically bonded to them. And then they are just off doing whatever they want with some other floozy and living their best life. But listen, they're not living their best life because they're disgusting pigs and they're just doing whatever they need to do to cover up their pain. And that's why they
Yeah.
go from person to person to person. So while I don't have evidence that things are going the same inside that house, I do have enough to know, yes, things have not changed. He just got someone new. Okay.
Yes.
She almost has the same name as me, which I think is funny. And so
So
he's
weird.
so weird. And that's why I don't want to change my name. No, that's not. No, I just think it's funny. I'm like, really? You're so creative, It's like, don't even try. I mean, so I know enough from a couple of things my kids say. They don't even have to tell me this sounds like a red flag. No, they will tell me a story and I'll be like,
Know that one.
I know
Yeah.
exactly. And so has he changed? No. Do they change? No, they don't. And so this is kind of weird, but the girlfriend that he had before me, that we were all friends in college, we lost touch because who was I? Like, what the hell did I do? Married her boyfriend. I don't care. We've had discussions. So I always thought about her, whatever, but she never had social media. So recently, within months, she all of a sudden texts me. And I was like, oh my God. And she's like, if you want to talk, I'd love to talk, whatever. But let me tell you, yeah, because they dated for a couple years. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe it. I'm so excited to talk to you because we were friends. We were really good
Yeah.
friends. We knew each other for a few years in college. And so we were really good friends. And I missed her and I would think about her, but I'm like, I'm a
It
skank.
felt
I married her
inappropriate.
boyfriend.
Yeah. No,
It
I get
felt wrong.
it.
It felt wrong, but we did figure out we didn't have any overlap or anything. So it still felt wrong. The girl code should have been in there
Yeah.
somewhere. But I know my own patterns at that time. I would do anything for love. I was eating out of the trash, so I would do anything for love. And talking to her was so healing because we had the same stories and she knows his family. So if you think that they're changing and they're going to be this magnificent person for the next person, they are not. They just got a new person to put up with their bullshit. And if you think back to the beginning of your relationship, you weren't out within a few months, you know what I mean? Or a year or whatever. And so I think about that. She might be putting up with some stuff or, maybe she sees stuff. I know she sees stuff because I've already heard. I know she sees stuff, but she's willing to put up with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we can't worry about that, even though it's so tempting me to worry about it.
Well, and I think that that's a really important thing to touch on because I think for such a long time I held myself accountable for his actions and what he did and
Yeah.
what he felt in public and what he didn't feel in public. And that was such a really hard
Yeah.
burden to carry. Another really interesting question that I have for you is what do you think was the most unexpected lesson that you learned after you got out?
Well, okay, this was the biggest thing. I didn't expect to lose friends the way that I did. I didn't expect that.
You give a little context
Yeah.
on that?
When I started setting boundaries, that was weird for people because I was changing as a person. I always say I'm 3.5 years old. This is a brand new me. I've never been this person. I talk about politics and things like that. And stuff I never did because, of course, even if I agreed with him, I got in trouble. So you just don't talk about it. And I had a lot of stuff bubbling inside. So now I'm posting things and people are like, what is happening? Who are you? And I'm like, I don't know.
Figuring it
Who
out as we
knows?
go.
Who knows? And so Laura with boundaries and Laura changing didn't make sense to some people, right? So I started to lose friends that way. And listen, you don't have breakups. They just don't call you as often, all those kinds of things. Except I did have a breakup with actually my best friend who chose to not exactly believe me and say like, are you sure that happened? Did you ever really catch them? I'm like, I don't
Do I
understand.
need to?
Do I have, yeah, do I need to walk in? Their behavior was enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why do I have to catch them doing anything else? Because I know that if you saw your husband acting that way with a woman, you'd go like, what the hell? You'd jump across the table.
Yes.
You know, me now, yes, I jump across the table, but I didn't then. Those kinds of breakups were wildly a surprise to me, to the point where I would call my coach and be like, so that's it? I have no friends. That's it. I'm not going to have friends. So this is it. I got a divorce. So now I have no friends. She's like,
Yes.
they're coming. And listen, I had some friends that were already in my life, but because I started talking about this, they were like, hey, did you know my first marriage was abusive? Oh, because we don't talk about it. And
Yes.
so I found out I had people coming out of the woodwork, people from church, tons of people that I knew that just were like, Laura, I used to be in an abusive marriage and you're going to be okay. Oh my gosh. So that was another surprise to me. And then the shouldn't be talking about it or calling it abuse because you didn't get hit. Yeah, those
I
people,
hate that
hello,
one.
hello, can
I
you hear me?
hate that
I'm
one.
talking. Yeah. And
Ugh.
even some people who were in abuse, in emotional abuse, telling me it's not really abuse, don't talk about it. But then I was in a high control religion as well. And so, you just stand by your man, we are really taught that. And I said, no, I'm not doing that anymore. I don't believe that. There are for anybody who wants a Christian point of view, if you want to hear like people who are doing this work, psychologists who are doing this work, I have it on my website under resources because there are people who are like, nope, the scripture said, no, they will give you all the scriptures on how you can get out if you feel like you need that. Because no, God doesn't want you in abuse. So end of story. That's the bottom line. And so anyway, there's people doing this work. I don't do that work. I'm just here to tell you that get out, run for your life.
Yes.
So, but those were the surprising things of how big a shift in my life of losing people and people telling me not to talk, especially when I was starting my podcast. Oh my gosh. And that it was going to be rated E because I cuss. And that's the end
Yeah.
of the story. And if you've never been in abuse, well, thank your lucky stars that you don't have to use
Yes.
the F bomb every other word because that's the only thing that makes you feel good. And I actually did a video on how the F word chemically helps your brain to process things
I
because it's
believe
rather than saying fudge, that's different. There's
yes.
just something that happens. It's a big dopamine hit. I don't care. It doesn't matter. I'm a grown adult. If you don't like it,
Yeah.
please scroll away. And so it's hard. Like I used to, be heavily involved in church. I'm not anymore. And people are like, I want to listen to your podcast. And I'm thinking, okay,
You
clutch your pearls.
can.
Clutch your pearls.
I do the same. I feel like we're so similar in so many things. But
Yeah.
I do think that there are so many people that really do want to talk about their trauma and want to
Yeah.
feel like someone sees them and someone relates to the things that they're
Hmm.
going through. But I think trauma in general is just so uncomfortable for certain people that have
Yes.
never experienced it or never done it. So I think that leads us into our final question. Well, so it sounds like you have had some doozies in your day and had some quite interesting things said to you. But out of all of it, what do you think the most shocking advice or something said to you in it all was? Because it sounds like even in that time when people are coming to you behind closed doors and you're finding all of this purpose
Yeah.
in that, but then all
Yeah.
these people that were with you are going, holy crap, what are you doing?
I think just the thing that I had mentioned earlier was that, are you sure that that's what happened? Are you sure? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And so that's the hard part because you've already been with somebody who is making you question your reality because that's their entire intent. Because the gaslighting is their bottom line. They want to confuse you so that you can stay and they can do whatever they want. So you're already confused because I did question myself. It was so painful. And if you haven't been in it, you don't realize because I did question myself. And when people were like, "Are you sure that happened?" Whatever. And of course, I was like, "Am I the narcissist?" Because, and then of course, I Googled that and of course, narcissists will tell you you're a narcissist. And if you think you're the narcissist and you're sitting here pondering, am I the narcissist? You're already not because narcissists
Yeah.
don't do that. Narcissists
No.
don't care if they are all about the abuse. So that's a quick quiz. Do you care? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Then you're not a narcissist.
Done.
That's it. That's only one question quiz.
Yes.
So that was the biggest surprise to me because I really thought, you guys, I've been abused. And everybody would just rally around me and go, Laura, we are here for you. And people were like, are you sure? Sure
Yeah.
about that? Yeah, that to me was the hardest thing to hear. That was the
Which
hardest
I
thing to
think
hear.
is so crazy, and I've heard it from so many people, and I don't remember I think it was a guest who her father passed away, and she said, "One of the things that I learned after this is so many people compare their trauma, and then they're like, okay,
Yeah.
well, this person had it worse, so I must be fine." And I think that that is a big lesson that you and I can scream from the
Mhm.
rooftops that just because one person doesn't think it's bad doesn't mean you don't have to think it's bad. If it's bad for you and it makes you unhappy, that's enough. That's all it needs to be. No one needs to give you
That's
permission or
exactly
tell
it.
you
Yeah.
that you're unhappy. If you're unhappy, that's all that you need to know.
And listen, look how many things that we talked about, even on my podcast and then this. You have a different story than I have, but look at how similar we are. Look at the
Yes.
experiences we had. And this is the other thing I want to say. If you can't relate to this, thank your lucky stars that you can't
Mhm.
relate to this. And then the thing that you can do is if a friend is telling you their story, just say, I don't understand. That's never happened to me, but I believe you and I'm here for you. We just
Yes.
need you to listen. We don't need you to fix it. We don't need you. We sure the hell don't need you to say like, are you sure? Yeah, we're pretty sure, and if we don't feel sure, it's because we're being abused because my brain felt like Swiss cheese and it was a pleasure to actually wake up one day and go like, "Oh my god, I have clarity. What? I can
I
actually think about things."
only have to take care of myself.
I mean, and
That
then
was the
like,
biggest thing.
oh my gosh, yes, to not worry about like to get up. He hated that I would drink coffee in bed. He just called me lazy and all that. I do it every single morning.
Oh,
Every
I
morning
love
I get
that for
back into
you.
bed. Even in the summer, I don't care. I get back into bed with my cup of coffee and I just laugh because it's like, this is the thing that people don't understand. It's those simple things because even those simple things were abusive.
Yes.
I used to I used to wanna sit at the kitchen table and, like, journal, but that was a big deal, and he was just whatever, he would look over at my journal, and whatever he would do, he'd make fun of me or whatever, and so there wasn't any peace in my home, and I hated that, and so now, when it's quiet, I don't feel lonely, I actually feel peaceful. Because if I'm lonely and I want friend time, oh my god, I have so many friends I can call, but I love my peace, love the peace that I have in my home.
Thank you so much, Laura. I think you are amazing. We definitely have to stay in contact because I
Yes,
feel
of
like we could have
course.
so many conversations about so many
Yes.
topics.